Cagayan de Oro Representative Rufus Rodriguez, chair of the House Ad Hoc Committee on the Bangsamoro Basic Law, or the BBL, is confident that the proposed law will be passed before the June 11 deadline. Senate Committee on Local Government Chair Senator Ferdinand Marcos, on the other hand, feels no pressure in passing the BBL, saying timetables and deadlines would limit their ability to fully study the BBL. The Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or the MILF, earlier expressed sentiments over the slow deliberations and warned that its non-passage could push disgruntled factions to wage war. MILF spokesperson Muhager Iqbal, however, assured that their group will not back out of the peace process no matter what happens to the BBL. Meanwhile, Senator Frank Dulon eyes the BBL's passage in October. So tonight we ask, should the Congress pass the Bangsamoro Basic Law as soon as possible? Join our discussion tonight here on Agenda.
Good evening. I am Malou, Tiquia, and this is Agenda. Our debate question for tonight: should the Senate pass the Bangsamoro Basic Law under the Aquino administration? Find out here on Agenda, where opinions clash, making sense of today's most relevant issues. Our guests for tonight, Amina Rasul, Director of the Philippine Council on Islam and Democracy, and Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr., Chairman of the Senate Committee on Local Government. Thank you, Amina and Senator Marcos, for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Amina, is the June 11 deadline that crucial?
Well, I think it's already moot and academic, as they say. I think the question really is, should the BBL be passed before the end of the term of President
So right
Aquino?
now, we're talking of the June 11. You think the House will be able to pass this, their draft on June 11?
They could, but even that is doubtful because there are so many who are still waiting to interpolate. So the timing really makes it impossible for June 11. Mm-hmm. But should it be passed under the administration of President Aquino?
So you're talking of
I think
until
so.
June 2016?
They're even saying October. That
Senator,
you can still pass
is October a realistic date for the Senate?
Actually, truth be told, there aren't any real deadlines.
Yeah.
The June 11 deadline does not appear anywhere in the agreements, does not appear in the draft BBL. So that is something that we say that we would like to have passed it in June 11, but it looks very difficult that will happen, both in the House and in the Senate. The October becomes important because that is the deadline for the filing of certificates of candidacy. Right. So will our candidates in Muslim Mindanao be filing as armed officials or as members of the Bangsamoro Parliament? That has to be, we have to know that by October.
Yes. The timeline for the plebiscite would be questionable still.
Well, the plebiscite, it's a process because once the ABBL, whatever version is passed by both houses of Congress, signed into law, we expect that there will be challenges in the Supreme Court. Following that will then be the conduct of the plebiscite. The problem is that the COMELEC needs, as they have told us, 6 months
to prepare.
And they cannot prepare until the BBL has been passed. So that we know exactly which provinces are included in the plebiscite, exactly how it's going to be done. Once they have that, they will have to draw up the voters' lists, and that will take 6 months. And then the conduct of the plebiscite, and at which time the government will then slowly be established, and then the elections will occur. Now, the reason that we have tried to keep it in this administration is because of the desire of the palace that the elections for parliamentary members of the Bangsamoro Parliament be done at the same time as the national and local elections of May 2016.
So synchronized.
Synchronized. Yes.
Synchronized.
Like the arm. Yeah.
So in doing so with the deadlines, so when Amina said probably within the term of this incumbent, is that something realistic?
Yeah, I think that's enough time for us to finish. I'm trying to look forward. We cannot, of course, predict how long the debates will take, both at the committee level and at the plenary level.
Senator, do you doubt that the BBL in its basic form guarantees peace?
In the way that it has been passed to us, I don't think it will bring us peace, simply because it has been an inclusive process. It has not been an inclusive process. And so many groups, so many different sectors, so many different stakeholders were actually not consulted. And this is those stakeholders, we need their support, we need their understanding of the process for this to succeed. And so we have tried to remedy that by conducting hearings of those stakeholders who say themselves that they were not consulted and were not part of the process. And they feel left out. And they ask why did the government only negotiate or speak or sit down with the MILF?
Right.
And how did it happen that the MILF spoke for all the other groups when they had not been recognized, designated, authorized by anyone to be the representatives? So that's why I think that is going to be that will end up being a problem.
Amina, I was with you in one of those public consultations, and the reality on the ground is really different. Can you speak about that?
Well, there are two things here. There's the legislation and there's the peace agreement. The peace agreement would not have been necessary if we did not have armed conflict. And why is there armed conflict? Because the Mujahideen of Muslim Mindanao from the 70s have been fighting for independence. Because the history of the Bangsamoro has always made a big point on stating that our sovereignty was stolen. The Americans gave us to the Philippine Republic, and they had no right to because we were sovereign. So now, to end the wars, peace process, negotiations started by Senator Marcos's father. So the peace process ended with an agreement to have autonomy instead of independence. And autonomy, I think, is a very acceptable
So
in
that's
view
one that is
independence.
non-negotiable.
That's non-negotiable.
Very clear to both sides of the debate.
That's right.
That,
and when you have a
autonomy is very
peace
important.
process, it cannot be a consultative process where you consult all, because you are negotiating, and most of the negotiations are secret. You're negotiating with a liberation front. First the MNLF and now the MILF.
Which they say they're a revolutionary group.
Exactly. However, to my knowledge, both the MI and government panels did their own quiet backdoor channels, and they did their own consultations. The massive consultations should take effect after the agreement when you now work on legislation. The problem is there are certain groups that have not been part of that. But does that mean the sectoral interests have not been discussed? I think all the sectoral interests have been touched.
Okay.
No, I will have to beg to differ, simply because that is not what we are hearing in our hearings with those sectoral representatives. And precisely the reason that they insisted on coming to the Senate and speaking before the committee was so that the issues that they feel, their issues that they feel were not attended to, that were not discussed, that were not spoken about, and that they were not consulted about, were never aired, and that they wanted a chance to air those issues. And much of the time, it was not to say that they were against the process.
They were not.
Many of them, especially the Sultanates, were saying, we want to help. Give us something. We are able to help in many ways. Include us in the process.
So you're saying, Senator, that the MILF may have credibility and sincerity issues?
Well, I think that it's simple because again, the MILF became the spokesman for everybody, and they,
Parang default.
and
By default.
everybody and the others were the other groups are saying we have never authorized or recognized them as our representatives. So why should they be deciding now about our land, about our lives, about our political system? There's no need to argue about it because there was already the Zamboanga uprising. That is an effect,
proof,
that is an upshot. Well, this is not speculation. That what might happen, it has happened. That is the.
And again, the Mama Sapano is another test of.
That was another test
the
of
protocols of
that's
peace
right.
process.
That is something that we had looked into in great detail and tried to remedy. We will try to remedy in our version of the in the Senate of the BBL.
Okay.
But I really don't think that what happened in Zamboanga and Mama Sapano is that material to the law. Because what happened in Mama Sapano was a tragedy because of, well, many say now, because of the reports that came out, really poor leadership and poor judgment. What happened in Mama Sapano? If the protocols had been followed, then there would have been success in the arrests because it has been proven already.
Would you say the Mama Sapano incident, I do not want to say this, but was it deliberately done to derail the peace process?
Maybe not, but I think the leadership within the PNP really made a grievous blunder, a very, very tragic error.
We'll just take a short break. Join our discussion on Facebook or tweet your thoughts using the hashtag CNNPHAgenda and CNN Philippines. Stay tuned. You're watching Agenda. Welcome back. You're still watching Agenda. Amina Rasul, Director of the Philippine Council on Islam and Democracy, and Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr., Chairman of the Senate Committee on Local Government, are our guest. Our agenda for tonight: should the Senate pass the Bangsamoro Basic Law under the Aquino administration? Now, Senator Marcos, if there is not enough push to get it out during this administration, is there a possibility that the next administration, this would still be center of that of the programs of the next government?
I think that it will depend on the quality of the final form of the bill that will be the BBL. What final version? If it is a good version, if it is a version that is constitutional, that can be seen to be solving the problems, then every president needs to pay a great deal of attention to the situation in Muslim Mindanao. If, however, their opinion is that it is flawed, and so flawed that it should be changed completely or another direction should be explored, then then probably they will abandon it and try something else. But again, it is dependent upon how good the version of the BBL is that will be passed into law.
Amina, the bicameral seems to be the loggerheads now. I mean, the House is saying we're going to pass this as it is. The Senate, through the chairman of the local government committee, has said in his privileged speech that he will not allow any unconstitutional measure to pass by his committee. The bicameral would be the worst point. Do you think there would be agreement there?
I think our leaders, at the end of the day, are going to be reasonable men and women. Given what is at stake, they will do the best they can to ensure that what had been previously agreed on, autonomy in lieu of independence, can be provided. No peace agreement can ever bring peace. It's a piece of paper. But it lays a very good framework so that you can have real autonomy. With real autonomy, then the Bangsamoro can govern themselves and prevent further radicalization, prevent the armed conflict that led to such debacles, tragedies as Mama Sapano. And I hope at the end of the day, that is what our legislators will remember. And Senator Marcos, you know, for me, the best framework, I think, would be what your father provided us, the 1976 Tripoli Agreement. But I don't think our legislators are going to allow that to be the framework these days.
The BBL in the context of the Tripoli Agreement and of the Jakarta Agreement of 1996, that is one of the actual issues that how does that work now? What happens? The MNLF is asking what happens to all of the gains that we had and that were enshrined in then the Tripoli Agreement and then finally the Jakarta Agreement of 96. The political problem arises because the Tripoli Agreement and the Jakarta Agreement of 96 were negotiated by the government with the MNLF, and they are products of that negotiation. This now is a product of the negotiation between the government and the MILF. And so that is where the differences lay.
Right.
And there are political problems between the two groups as to who should be ascended. That's why we have to attend to all of these, because they are an armed group, they're still an armed group, they can cause a great deal of trouble. As they
So do you see repercussions if these are not, if the law is not enacted?
Well, what I think will happen is that we will make sure that these issues are addressed, and so that we will not see another Zamboanga uprising. On your point about the bicameral, bicameral committee, the problem really has happened because the versions of the House and the Senate were converging until the midnight meetings
the weekend
in
draft.
Malacanang.
Yes.
And then they diverged.
Right.
So I'm afraid that politics reared its ugly head and caused all of these basic issues to between now the House version and what will be the Senate version.
You're talking of the Bangsamoro police force?
No,
the
well, yes. The
asymmetric form of government?
Well, no, I'm talking about the constitutional infirmities that they were going to remedy, but then the LP version took over, and those remedies were removed. The opt-in provision is a highly...
Are you in favor of that?
No, not in the slightest. I think it's so problematic. It's not in concept and in actual execution and implementation. It is very hard to see.
You talk of one piece of paper. An arm is a piece of paper, and they've said it's a failed experiment. Can you comment on that?
I disagree. I think that there are systemic weaknesses in the arms system. So what do? We fix them. There is no need to throw out the baby with the bathwater, as they say. We have amended already the organic law for armed once with RA 9054. So that was a help. That was one step in the right direction. So let's take more steps in that right direction. There is also the constitutional problem of creating another autonomous region. There is no mandate in the Constitution for doing that. And so a solution around that would be to say this is merely an amendment
of the existing law.
Of the existing law.
This is a law that's going to be passed to implement essentially the comprehensive agreement for the Bangsamoro, which is a peace agreement. The only thing that we are lobbying for, everybody is lobbying for, is that it would stay as close as possible to the spirit of the comprehensive agreement for the Bangsamoro, which means essentially give real autonomy. How can you be politically autonomous if for everything you need you have to run home to mama to get your budget? Now they're going to put in the essentially fiscal autonomy for this.
These are the birth pains of trying to set up a really good autonomous government.
And you need legislation for that. It cannot be done
one of the biggest criticism of ARM is that the budget, the 24.3 billion budget of ARM, which is what the budget was for 2015, that budget was not felt by ordinary people. And it did not flow down to the people. And so the culprit, they said, was that the COA was also part of the ARM, and therefore it was self-auditing, as it were, and not answerable to national government.
So, Senator Marcos, what is the version that you will use in coming up with your committee report? You're doing a substitute bill, right?
We will probably propose, and I will end up sponsoring a substitute bill. The basis of still is the draft BBL is given us. and then we will go through it.
Not the Saturday draft, not the weekend draft.
No, I do not think that I will ever put that as a committee substitute bill, because it is something that I disagree with many parts of. I disagree with many parts of. So what we will do is we'll start with the draft BBL, and then first handle the constitutional issues and try to remedy those. And then the administrative issues. When we talk about asymmetric relationship, what we have come to understand, people assume that meant the relationship between Bangsamoro government and the national government. That is
Yes,
not so.
no, that's true.
It is asymmetric with other local governments. And we have to see, it has to be shown what justifies the differences between the share in national wealth, the share in taxes of the local government units, and what justifies the difference with the Bangsamoro government.
So
There
asymmetric
are-
is more on federalism too, right?
Well,
Not a unitary form of government.
That is another,
Step
that's
closer.
another constitutional
So
problem.
we're like transitioning
Step
towards...
closer.
Well, we are not really transitioning towards federalism. We are creating
a different...
an entirely unique, something we've never done before, an entirely unique form of local government, which we have never conceived of before. The priority is not to come under the deadline. The priority is to get it right, and that is the much more important thing.
Amina, as a Filipino Muslim, will there be a point in our generation when the problem can be rightfully solved?
Oh, I think so. I have rose-colored glasses all the time. One basic failing in the law is that the autonomous region is not autonomous because it cannot support itself.
So financially.
Senator Marcos, you mentioned earlier about the problem being COA auditing for ARMM and not linking it to the national. But apart from that, the budget really was never enough.
Final words, Senator.
Well, all I have to say is that the people can count on, they can be confident that we will not allow anything to be hurried, anything to be railroaded. We will do this very carefully, and I always say that we should not fear doing the right thing. Huwag tayong matakot gawin ang tama, at yan ang aming gagawin sa proseso ng pagsulat ng version ng BBL sa Senado.
Amina, final words.
Our final word, Muslims in the South do not want to be treated any different from any Filipino. But please, stop treating us as a citizen of Bongao, Tawi-Tawi. We want to be treated like a citizen of Ilocos Sur, a citizen of Makati, of Rojas City. In other words, give us what you're giving, everything that you're giving to the ordinary Filipino citizen, plus what is guaranteed to us under the Constitution, which is autonomy.
Okay. On that note, we would like to thank our guest, Amina Rasul, Director of the Philippine Council on Islam and Democracy, and of course, Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr., Chairman of the Senate Committee on Local Government. That's all for tonight on Agenda. Tune in again next week as we take a stance on the issues affecting every Filipino. I am Malou Tiquia. Good night.